Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Rada Madrigal and I'll be taking you through today's session. I'm joined virtually by some of my colleagues who may speak up during our question and answer session or to provide clarity when needed as we discuss this topic. We're here to talk to you today about the changes being implemented as part of the CIRA Enhancements project. CIRA is the Customer Interface for Resource Adequacy. In an effort to increase transparency and provide greater service to our stakeholders, we are recording this webinar. It will be posted on our website so that you can review it in the future and for those who were not available to join today's call. These slides are posted now on CISA.com and can be found in the Learning Center under New Modules. A quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. In this training, you will learn how to upload your flexible capacity survey files, where to view your RA plan reports, where to view acquired resources, and where to view third-party scheduling coordinator contact information. We'll also talk about how we're going to be sourcing load-serving entity IDs from master file going forward in CIRA, and I'll show you which reports are being relocated to Oasis. Here for your reference, and for those of you that are looking at the presentation that's posted online, is a list of abbreviations and acronyms that we're going to be using throughout the presentation. I will do my best to say the word first before I resort to using the acronym, but they're here for your visual reference. With regard to the rollout of the CIRA enhancements, the implementation timeline is still a little bit in flux. I don't want to give you a new date today and then have it change. So what we decided was that if you tune in to the meetings next week that we're having on this topic, February 22nd, we've got the Reliability Requirements Customer Partnership Group, and you'll get more information there on when we're going to be deploying into Market SIM. And then if you stay tuned to the RUG meetings, the next one's coming up on February 23rd, you'll get latest updates on when we're going to be moving to the production environment. So stay tuned to our regular meetings and you'll be able to keep track of the deployment plan for this project. As we're getting ready to roll out these CIRA enhancements, I wanted to go over a couple of the readiness activities that you should be aware of. First, the ISO will make sure that users are ready, meaning we have provisioned everybody to the appropriate LSC IDs in time for the implementation into production. Our customer experience team and some folks from customer readiness have been working with your user access administrators and having meetings with them to go over specifically what they need to do to make sure that folks have the right access. So those meetings should already have taken place or be taking place for you this week and next. Now, before we have these changes go into effect, we'd ask you to make your best effort to resolve any outstanding cross-validation errors for your April compliance month, just so that when you get into the new application, when that is rolled out and we're starting to plan for May, that you've got everything already set for April as best as possible. We also would like you to make sure that your LSC RA plans have the new LSC IDs listed in your admin info tab, and that's for the May compliance month. And also to make sure that those corresponding suppliers that you have contracted with have also updated their supply plans to reflect those same new load serving entity IDs on their RA capacity tab. Those items, making sure you have those items taken care of prior to implementation will ensure that things go smoothly for everyone. So now that that housekeeping information and overview content is out of the way, I wanted to go over some of the changes to CIRA, the application, and then later we'll talk about the Oasis changes. We are introducing a process change. So there is a process for the flexible capacity needs assessment. Today, scheduling coordinators of load serving entities submit their flexible capacity survey files to the ISO as part of our flexible capacity needs assessment process. We determine the quantity of flexible capacity needed for the upcoming RA year and how that quantity is allocated to the local regulatory authorities. Now, in the past and up until now, these survey files were submitting using CITI, or the Customer Inquiry Dispute and Information application. And then our short-term forecasting team processes those survey files to calculate that flex requirement for the load serving entity. This activity will now take place within CIRA. Now, to give you some of the context as part of the process, the ISO sends out notices with a link to our data request template, and along with that, a submission deadline. The data request template is what we call the survey files in CIRA. Now, the deadline for the 2020 annual Flex RA submission was January 15th, so you should already have taken care of that. But here is a picture of a screenshot of what that template looks like, and I've also included a link to this template at the end of the slides in the reference section if you aren't familiar with it and want to see what it looks like. I did get a note from our forecasting team that asked me to pass along to participants, so I wanted to share that with you now. They wanted me to emphasize that the contact information tab of the survey file, which you can see I've put a little square around in the screenshot there, that's where you identify the LRA and the LSC. They asked me to make sure that you put the correct LRA ID and LSC ID here, and also not leave this area blank. That makes sure that these files are processed correctly and also quickly. So if you could do that for us, that would be great. And now where you would go to upload those survey files in CIRA, we've added this functionality to the planning tab or the plans tab under Flex and then Capacity Survey. So if you follow that navigation, you will arrive at a screen that says Flex Capacity Survey File. And this screen gives you the option to either upload that survey file or to view the file that has been uploaded or to actually download it. If you were going to go through the process of uploading it, you would choose the appropriate assessment year. You would pick your LSC ID from the drop-down menu, and then you would click Choose File to browse for that Excel file template, and then click the Upload button. Now, CIRA then validates the survey files that get uploaded and ensures that they're in the right format. They need to be in Excel, for example. So there's some validation done there. And then the other buttons, the View button, if you click on that, you'll see information about the survey file, as you can see in the screenshot there. You'll see the assessment year, the load serving entity, the date the file was submitted, the status of the file, and so forth. So you'll have some information about the file and its status. If you click the Download Survey File button, then you can actually download that Excel file, that survey file that was submitted for that selected load serving entity ID. Another thing I wanted to share with you from the same Plans tab is the support files. So the support files are provided by the ISO, and they contain a preview of what your RA obligation allocation looks like, including background data and calculations for that. So these support files are uploaded into CIRA from our forecasting team, and scheduling coordinators for the load serving entity then have the ability to either view or download that data. These support files give the LSC a preview of the RA obligation allocation, including background data and the calculations used to arrive at those numbers. So, for example, when you take a look at the final report, those final numbers that are published, you'll just see a total. But the support files will show you how we arrived at those numbers. So it gives you the breakdown among those various categories. So you'll be able to see those inside of CIRA as well by going to the Plans menu, Flex option and clicking on Support Files. When you're on this screen here, you'll have the ability to download the preliminary or the final files based on the LSC ID. So if you click the View button, you'll see information about the support file, for example, the assessment year, the load serving entity, the status of the file. And then if you click the Download button, you'll actually download the support file and be able to see all of that background calculation that was done to arrive at those numbers. So this gives you a preview that you can kind of validate before those final numbers come out. Speaking of the final numbers, your flexible RA obligation allocation will also be inside of CIRA. Off that same Flex menu on the Allocations option, you'll be able to view your flexible RA obligation allocation here. So the short-term forecasting team will upload these files to you, and then you'll be able to download and see your RA allocation. You'll see that there will be a status of either draft or final. If you click on the View button, you'll be able to see the flexible RA obligation allocation for that selected LSC ID. And then if you click the Download button, you'll be able to download this report in Excel format. So the allocation file shows the RA obligation allocation for that selected LSC ID. It'll show you the total requirements as well as how that's divided between categories 1, 2, and 3, which are your base, peak, and super peak categories. And again, the allocation report will just show you these numbers. The support files that I talked about will show you how those numbers were calculated. Now, before we move on to talking about acquired contracts, because all of that was talking about flexible RA, I wanted to take a pause here to see if anybody had any questions about those three things that we just talked about. So Tegan, if you wanted to check with the audience to see if folks have a question, or you could also put that question in the chat if you'd like.
All right, if you'd like to ask a question verbally, dial #2 on your telephone keypad. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted, at which point please state your name and the company you represent before asking your question. You can also submit your questions in writing by using the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Just remember to select all panelists from the drop-down menu before submitting your question. All right, looks like we do have a caller in the question queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hello, my name is Mark Thomas, and I have a quick question regarding the flex submissions. So given that those were already due and submitted via city ticket, is it CAISO's wish for us to now resubmit them once the CIRA application goes live for 2022 into the CIRA portal, or would this be for future years here? Thank you.
Abdul, do you want to take that one?
Okay.
Yeah, this is Abdul. Hong would know the answer best, but I think from my understanding, their short-term forecasting team is planning to use this starting with next year's process. So they'll continue using City for this year, and for next year they'll start using this functionality in CIRA because the process this year already started in City.
I'm with you. No, thank you very much, Abdul. I appreciate it. And it sounds like, though, that we'd be able to access the support files as well as the allocation report once the team processes those city tickets. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we do have another caller in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Yes, hi, good morning. This is Efren with the City of Vernon. Just on the process, will the due date change for next year, the January 15th deadline? Will that change?
This is Abdul again. I believe not. No, the dates, there's no plans to make any changes to the due dates. or the the steps, the process. The main change is the interaction is going to be between CAISO and the participants through CIRA instead of city as it's being done today.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'm not showing any other questions at this time.
All right, we'll move forward with the next piece. So this piece here, the Acquired Contracts Report, is a new report that we're putting out in CIRA. Your acquired contracts are things that predate the RA program and have exemptions to some of the RA provisions. For example, RAIM, the Resource Adequacy Availability Incentive Mechanism, would be an exemption. These resources can be used to meet your RA obligation, and scheduling coordinators can view their acquired resources on this new Acquired Contracts Report, which is accessible from the Reports menu. So you'll see the navigation path there on the slide. And if you click on that and then click the View button, you'll see the acquired contracts associated with that selected SCID. And the download button there allows you to download that report into Excel format. And you can see a sample of that there in the screenshot. Another item that we are implementing, this was based on requests from our customers. We've now put contact information for third-party scheduling coordinators available on the screen there when you're creating forced outage substitutions. So when you have an RA resource that has a forced outage, Section 9.3.3 of the Reliability Requirements BPM indicates that a substitution may be required for that RA impacted portion. When you submit a forced outage, you'll be doing that from the substitutions menu and creating that forced outage. If you create a substitution with RA capacity that you are not the SC for, the SC for that resource does have to approve it in CIRA, and so those SCs requested access to this third-party contact information to help streamline this process. So when you upload those supply plans into CIRA, we take the name, the email, the phone number, so that contact information for those substitution scheduling coordinators get populated into the tool based on that data that we put there, or based on, the data that you put there on the admin info tab. So as an SC for these resources, in order to help everyone out and make this process streamlined, we ask that you make sure that you've got that contact information available there on your admin info tab. And then when you go in to create a forced outage substitution, you can see here I've kind of put a square around that contact information. When you select that resource, you will see where it says the third-party name, third-party email address, and also phone number, so that you can use that information should you need to contact them about approving or discussing this forced outage substitution. Now, another change is that LSC IDs are now going to be sourced from master file. So CIRA will begin to source the list of LSC IDs from the master file application, and this update requires changes to access provisioning to prevent the loss of access to upload resource adequacy plans into CIRA. Now, we did have a training on this particular item for all of your user access administrators, and that was done in January to give them a heads up that this type of change was coming to CIRA and to make sure that we were ahead of the need to make those changes, and that needed to take place first so that we could then implement these CIRA enhancements. So your UAAs have received information on what they need to do with regard to the specific LSC IDs that they are managing to make sure that they provision those LSC IDs to the appropriate role, whether it's external read-only or the read-write role. And then we have been in the process of working with those UAAs to make sure they are aware of what they need to do on their end. So there have been separate meetings to go over each individual scheduling coordinator and the LSC and what they need to do to make sure that your access is going to be set up prior to rolling out the CIRA enhancements. There is more information around that already posted on the Learning Center. There's both a presentation and a recording of that presentation with regard to provisioning access to CIRA in our AIM tool. But again, we've already had those meetings with your user access administrators, and so that process is well underway. That is all of the CIRA enhancements that I have to share with you. Before we move on to talk about the Oasis reports, I'd like to take another question break here to see if anybody has any questions they'd like to go over.
All right, once again, if you'd like to join the verbal question queue, dial #2 on your telephone keypad. Again, that's #2 to ask your question verbally. You'll need to state your name, the company you represent, and then your question. Looks like we do have another caller in the question queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Jesse Adamski with Constellation Energy. My question was on the LSCID change. How are import allocation rights going to be handled since the import allocation rights are tied to the existing SCID? Will CAISO just migrate those over when the changes takes effect, or will we need to do something to have those import allocation rights move to the correct LSCID?
Hey, this is Abdul again. For all the existing rights in CIRA, we're going to migrate them to the new LSCID. All the import allocation rights, that we're going to migrate them when we deploy this enhancement to production. So you're going to see all your rights under the new, the master file LSCID. And then any future, submissions you make, like trades or again, RA plans or anything future that you submit, you have to use the master file LSCID. But for all the existing data in CIRA, we're gonna transfer them for you to the master file LSCID.
Okay, thank you. I guess since it's kind of TBD as to when this is going to take effect, if we're like in the process of like, if we're imminently about to request a transfer, is that something that we do to our existing SCID or to the new LSCID?
So we're planning to deploy early March. We don't have the exact date yet from IT, but we were hoping to do it early March so you could transition to using the master file LSCIDs starting with the May RA showing. So if we deploy first or second week in March, that should be before the deadline, the T-45 deadline for the May showings, which I believe is March 17, I think. So the hope is as soon as we deploy, as soon as we get a better sense of the exact date, we'll share it, and then we're hoping that after we do the deployment, you can upload all your May showings, May RA showings using the master file LSCIDs.
Okay, so I guess just to summarize, if the existing allocations are going to be migrated, if we're doing a transfer prior to March, we should use the existing SCID, but if it's going to be post-March, you're suggesting using the new LSCID?
Yes, I mean the deployment, if we don't deploy in March, then yeah, we're gonna, everything is gonna continue as is today using the existing LSCIDs in CIRA. But if everything goes according to plan and we deploy early March, then starting with the May RA showings, you'll need to submit the master file LSCIDs in your showings. And then something to clarify for the import allocation or the import allocation allocations that are currently in CIRA, we're transferring the 2021 data to your new LSCID. The historic stuff, so 2020 and before, we're going to leave it as is because it's no longer, in play. So the only transfers we're going to do are for 2021 data.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, not showing any other verbal questions. We did get a written question asking if the slides were going to be posted on CAISO's website.
Yes, we have a copy of the slides posted today on the Learning Center, and so you can find them there. And I'll post a link in the chat as well to the presentation for your reference right now. And then I also saw a note in the chat, a private message asking about a user access administrator for a specific scheduling coordinator that doesn't have access in CIRA yet. For you, Tracy, I would recommend that you reach out to your client representative. There were a couple of groups that either were already set up correctly and didn't need to have any additional contact. So you may want to take a look at the presentation that we posted from January. There was a list of everyone who the LSCID changes were going to affect. If you see your name on that list, you should have been contacted. If your name is not on that list, it means that everything should be set up correctly. But I would reach out to your client rep to make sure that you're taken care of before we roll these changes out. And that is the extent of the chat questions that I've seen. So I'm going to move on to talking about Oasis Report. So there's 3 reports that I'm going to be talking about today. 2 of them relate to CIRA, and another one is more of a additional Oasis report change that we wanted to share with you since we had you on the line talking about Oasis changes. So the first report, there are a couple of reports that we're moving from CISA.com into the Oasis application. One of them is the Net Qualifying Capacities report. So we provide a report on a resource's net qualifying capacity, which is the amount of RA capacity that an RA resource may be eligible to provide. Today, we post this report on the Reliability Requirements web page. I've taken a screenshot there and put a little square around where those reports exist today. We are going to be moving that to Oasis. Now, for those of you that have access to Oasis in the map stage environment, you can see this Net Qualifying Capacities report there now. So you have the ability to take a look at those Oasis changes now. The Net Qualifying Capacities report is now going to be posted at the on the Atlas Reference tab, there second from the bottom under Net Qualifying Capacities. So when you get to that report, you'll see that you have the ability to put in a series of dates, and you can either choose all resources or select specific resources, and then you'll click on Download CSV, and you'll download that file in Excel format, or I should say in CSV format, and there is a sample screenshot there. You can also download it in XML. Based on the size of report that you get, it's not going to display to the screen. So you'll set your report parameters, and then you'll click download on one of those 2 options. And then you can see an example of what that CSV file looks like there. Now, information about this report has been added to the Oasis tech specs on the developer site. So for those of you on the technical side of it, you can see that tech spec information there on the developer site. I see a question in the chat asking why we're transitioning this from the web page to Oasis. When we post things on the web page, it is a human that makes that happen. So posting it on Oasis allows you to get that same information, but faster, because that information is just automatically provided in the database, and then you're able to pull that data. So instead of relying on a human to go onto our website and upload an Excel file for you to then download, that data is going to be now available in the Oasis database, and you can run these reports ad hoc. The next report that I wanted to talk about that's moving to Oasis relates to the CPM designations. So the CPM designations report is something every time the ISO has the ability, for some background here, the ISO has the ability to procure backstop RA capacity as part of the capacity procurement mechanism or CPM process. If you're curious about that process and want to learn more about it, you can refer to Section 43A of the ISO tariff that covers the rules around that capacity procurement mechanism. And of course, the BPM for reliability requirements also shares the ISO's processes for implementing those tariff provisions. So part of the process regarding or around CPM designations includes posting a report with the details of that CPM. Today, this report is posted to the Bulletins, Reports, and Studies webpage, and we're going to be moving it to Oasis. So the CPM designations report will now be posted to Oasis at the navigation path off of the Public Bids tab. Now, these reports are published when a CPM occurs. And you'll see there on the slide, it says the report might show up in both places before we cut over fully to Oasis. So on our end, we have some validation that must occur before we fully transition from today's report format on CISO.com to the Oasis application. Again, we publish these reports when we issue a CPM. So the process is going to remain the same, meaning that we will issue a notice when we have created or when we have designated CPM with a link to that report. So when you see that notice come out, either in the daily briefing or if you're looking at the notices on the ISO's website, it will contain a link that will show you where you need to go. So right away you'll know where to look for that information. So you might see the information posted both in Oasis and on that CISO.com page in order to, or I should say before we fully cut over to the Oasis report. I see some questions in the chat asking about whether or not we're going to be able to download historic versions of the NQC file from Oasis by changing the date to a date in the past. Do I have somebody on the technical team that can tell me if we are doing this on a going forward basis or if there's going to be old NQC data available through Oasis? Can someone tell me that?
Right, this is Abdul. I think I can answer this one. The plan right now when we go live, it's going to be the latest data, the latest updates is going to be only in Oasis. We are working on an enhancement to get historic data also, an option to view historic or previous NQC versions in Oasis, but that's not going to go in production in March. So stay tuned for that one. And then for the tech factors, I think the second question from Noah, how will we post the tech factors? So the NQC report has, other than the NQC values, is the tech factors and there's the under construction list. Those will still be posted on CISO.com in that spreadsheet. Those values are only updated during the annual process. So once we post the final annual NQC list, the tech factors and the under construction resources will be there. They won't change, so we don't need to make monthly updates to it. But the main intent here for this one is to post the monthly NQC updates to Oasis. So that's, like Rada said, it's an automated process, from one software to another that doesn't need human intervention.
All right, so that answers another question in the chat that asked how often the data is going to be updated. So this will be updated on a monthly basis.
Right, yeah, they will continue. So today we post a report every month, once a month. We'll continue to do that. We also might post it more often if needed, but our BPM requirement is to post it once a month, and that's what we're going to commit to. As we do today.
All right. Here's an example of the CP. Oh, go ahead. Was there another thing you wanted to address, Abdul?
Yeah, I saw a similar one about NQC from Mohan. So the question is, will there be a within the year update of NQC? Yes, we'll be updating the NQC list monthly as we do today, and it's going to go to Oasis. And then the second part of the question, how about UCAP posting to Oasis? I guess we're not there yet. The UCAP is part of the phase 2 of our enhancements. It's planned for 2023. We didn't get into any of the implementation details yet. We're still doing high-level impact assessment, so we'll probably put it on Oasis too if possible, but we're not there yet.
All right, thanks for that clarity. Okay, so going back to the slides, here is an example of the sample download of the CPM Designations report that you would see on Oasis. So you can see that this report, again, if you have access to map stage now, this report is available in the map stage Oasis for you to take a look at. There is a sample download in the screenshot there. You can see the specific resources that have been issued as CPM. And then the final report that I wanted to talk to you about in Oasis relates to the full network model mapping data. Now, this particular Oasis change is unrelated to the CIRA Enhancements project, but it was one item that we wanted to talk to our customers about, and since we're talking to you now about other Oasis changes, it kind of seemed like a good segue to this report. So we'll talk about the full network model mapping data report, and then we'll break for additional questions. Today, the ISO's full network model defines our system parameters, pricing nodes, and market scheduling limit mappings, and also planned network model updates. Today, we post this data to our network and resource modeling web page. I've got a screenshot here for you with a square around that section. It is posted today in a series of Excel files, and they're separated out by full network model build and whether or not you're looking for ISO or EIM data points. So when we transition this to Oasis, it's also going to be there at your Atlas Reference tab. It'll be the last report on the list, the full network model mapping data. And when you get to that screen, there will be a couple of choices that you can make. So the full network model mapping data allows you to choose report parameters. So you'll have the full network model version, you'll have a market, either CAISO or EIM, and you'll be able to choose the mapping type. So there will be, today the Excel files have one for EIM and one for CAISO, so you will choose from the market dropdown either CAISO or EIM, and you'll also choose the mapping type. Today in the Excel workbook, there are separate sheets for each of those data points. So on Oasis, you'll use the mapping type field to select the type of data point you want to download, and those data points correspond with those sheets in the Excel workbook. Now, this particular report that we are porting to Oasis is we're still working on exactly what fields are going to be lined up. So on the screen here are preliminary report mockups. Once finalized, you'll see that data gets added to the Oasis tech specs on the developer site. So we have tech specs already on the other two reports that we talked about, the NQC and the CPM. Those are added to the Oasis tech specs on the developer site. But what you're looking at here is just a sample report mockup. So the data provided on each report will vary based on the mapping type selected. For example, if you select generating resource, you'll see a certain series of columns. If you look for the load aggregation point, you'll see a certain series of columns. So that is what that looks like there. Now, moving to the end, this is the opportunity to ask any final questions. And I know we've got a series of questions in the chat, and we also have someone in the verbal queue. So Tegan, why don't we go ahead and take verbal questions, and then we'll address the questions that we have in the chat.
Absolutely. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hey, this is Noah from SDK. Just a follow-up. So if in June I wanted to look at the data set for April, would the if I change the date for the NQC list, would the data that gets exported or displayed show the values as of April versus June?
Hey, Noah, this is Abdul. Yes, you can see the entire year, any month in the year. You can see it. It's the same report that we have today on a public page, or more accurately, what we have in CIRA actually. So whatever you see in CIRA in the NQC report, that's going to go to Oasis, so you can see any month during the year. What I meant by previous values, I meant like the previous version. So if we posted the NQC report this month, you can see this posting, the latest data for this year that we just posted. Next month, when we post again for the entire year, we'll overwrite those data, so you'll see the new values, the latest values we posted. So you can always see the latest values for the entire year. But, you know, like I said, we're planning to get version capability in there in Oasis. So, you know, hopefully you can see previous previously published data in Oasis as well. But that's not going to be in this go live date.
Got it. Thanks. So, but does that also mean? But is the overriding only specific or particular to like single year, in the sense that, you know, December 31st of 2021, we have a set of values, and then January 1st, 2022, we have a different set of values. That different set will not be overriding the 2021 values. It will only be established for the 2022 values. Correct?
Yes, correct. So we're only updating the current year values. We don't update previous years, and future years are not there yet. When we have those values, we'll start posting future years. But each year is going to be dealt with separately. Okay,
thank you. And then I noticed in both the CPM or the examples of the CPM report as well as the NQC report, you have groups. What are groups?
Oh, okay. That one is, as far as I understood, is just one of the columns that are in Oasis that are, you know, that's part of an Oasis format. It's not related specifically to the NQC list. I think Firdaus dropped off. He would have the better answer. He's from IT. But what I understood, because I asked him the same question, those groups, I think they're all in all the Oasis reports. They're not tied to the NQC. It's just an Oasis kind of thing. So I think you can ignore them in this case.
Okay. And will you be doing both flex RA values as well as NQC values?
Flex is yeah, so we're planning to. So we have an enhancement for this year, submitted for this year. So we're planning to work on posting EFC values to Oasis, and we're planning to post bilateral trades of import capability to Oasis. These two enhancements are in process for this year. So anytime by the end of the year, we're planning to deploy them as soon as IT is ready. But yeah, they're in the roadmap for this year.
Okay, and with given that these are available in Oasis, will there be an accompanying API to download these files?
I'm not sure.
I've got an update. I've got an update on the tech specs, Abdul. So, folks,
thank you.
Yes, there's an API that you can download this information from Oasis. The information about actually all of the reports. I was just told that we also have the tech specs for that FNM mapping data published to the developer site as well. So your IT groups or folks that are involved in setting up those APIs have access to our developer site, and the Oasis tech specs have been updated to include API data on these 3 reports that we are talking about now. And I believe we also referenced this in the most recent technical user group as well, possibly earlier this week. So all of that tech spec information for those folks that are going to be setting up those APIs is available on our developer website under Oasis. You can see that there.
That's great. Thank you so much. One final question. Would the CPM designation report will not be replacing the ISO's sort of written report that's I think due maybe like 10 days after the end of that the month, right?
Not yet. I mean, we're gonna go deploy this, see how it looks, and then we're gonna have further discussion internally with legal and management and see how the progress can be and if those reports are still needed. But as of now, we're not planning to eliminate the posting of the CPM reports because that's still a CIRA requirement.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, one final question. Do you plan on enhancing CIRA with APIs for the RA submissions and downloads and substitutions at some point?
The substitution specifically, you mean?
Yeah, for like forced outage substitutions, so forth. We're discussing this with management internally. The challenge with that enhancement is we are working in the policy world. We're trying to eliminate substitutions. We're hoping 2023, but that's still in the policy process. We don't know how it's going to look like. So the challenge internally is we invest in making an API option for substitution, but then at the same time we're trying to eliminate the substitution requirements in our enhancements process policy initiative. So I think that's where the challenge is for management to make that call. But there is discussions internally because we heard clients asking for that API for substitution. So we're working with management and we're trying to see what is feasible to be done. Yeah, thanks. The substitution isn't specific to forced outages, right? Even after the ISO's UCAP policy, if it gets implemented, it would still have substitutions potentially for planned outages, but really, whether or not the RA plans and supply plans could be submitted via API, that would be a good enhancement. Thanks.
Okay, noted. Thanks.
All right, we do have another caller in the verbal question queue. We'll go to that caller. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, good morning. This is Chen Yu from PG&E. A question that I heard that the reason behind moving all this from the web page to the Oasis is because without human intervention. So, but looks like there will be, so by end of this, there will be some of the reports going to be in Oasis and some of the reports it's still going to be on the web page. So how is the CAISO, so we'll say if I want to get a report, but the day is different, so I do need to go to 2 different places in order to get the report. Is that correct, or is that CAISO going to provide a transition period where when this is trying out, and then you were still going to post the report in 2 places, as on the web page and in Oasis?
So Chanyu, this is specifically for the CPM report that we were talking about here. And there was some discussion about that. With the CPM designations report, the data that you see on Oasis would be the same report data that you see currently posted in the manual report. If you take a look at this example here, it shows you the data about the CPM, the resources that were CPM'd, whether it was for a month or, the period of time. And this was the report that I said we have kind of a transition process, right? Before we fully cut over to Oasis, we have some validation that has to occur. This is what Abdul was talking about with a previous caller who asked about, along with the CPM designation report, there's also kind of an analysis or a couple paragraphs that explain why it happened and some data around that. So until we figure out how we're going to manage that process of providing all of that, background data along with the data of who actually received a CPM, you're going to see both of those reports. But this is only for that particular one, not all of the reports that we talked about today. So there's a little bit of uniqueness around the CPM designations because it comes with an explanation. If I take a look at, for example, you can't really see on this screenshot, but there will be information about either an exceptional dispatch or a significant event on the Bulletins, Reports, and Studies webpage where we post them now that kind of has some background information. So that's what we were talking about. There's some extra information that kind of gives background around who received the CPM and why, in addition to this right here that just shows you the resources that received the CPM. Until we figure that out, we're going to have that report information in both places. But the other reports, so the same data will be there. So you're not going to necessarily need to look in two places unless you want to read that background information, which, as you can see on this sample report, there really isn't space for that couple paragraphs of narrative as to why it happened. So that's the uniqueness around this particular report. Does that help?
Right. Yeah. Thanks for explaining. Actually, my question is probably, I'm glad you have a transition period for the CPM designation report and to why you're figuring things out. My question is for the full network model and the NQC. So it's going to be a dry cut as soon as, so when come to March 3rd, so we can only go to Oasis for the full network model report and also only going to the Oasis for the NQC, or is it going to be a transition period?
I believe we're doing a full cutover. The March 3rd date is still tentative. I know that our plan is to deploy in early March, and we're asking that you tune into both our release user group meetings and also the CPG coming up on Monday to get a little bit more information. So on Monday, you should learn when we're going to transition to or when we're going to deploy the CIRA enhancements into map stage for you to take a look at, and then we'll have a better handle on when our production deployment date is going to be. But when that happens, it's going to be a full cutover for those two reports that you had asked about.
Okay, thank you.
I see a question in the chat asking about Oasis and CIRA in map stage. So that is kind of what I was just talking about. The Oasis reports for the first two, the NQC and the CPM, those are available in map stage now today. You can take a look at that. CIRA enhancements, if you tune into the CPG on Monday, we should have more information for you on when CIRA enhancements are going to be available in map stage. Yes, our goal is to provide you some time for testing, which is why we're a little bit tentative on the release date, because once we get into map stage, we want you to have the ability, we want to give you the appropriate amount of time for you to do some testing before we deploy that into production. So those, I would suggest that you stay tuned to our RUG and check in with the CPG to get a better handle on those dates.
We have another caller in the question queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Mike Kramer from Boston Energy. I just have a follow-up question on the full network model change. The current PDF file includes the point of delivery and also the capacity megawatts of each resource. I don't see either of those on this mock-up screenshot, and I was wondering and requesting that those be added to this screenshot because that information is very helpful for market participants.
Now, I don't know if I've got a SME on the line about the FNM mapping file, so I will take that as a note. Unless, I don't know if Trang, if you have any information about that. I don't think all of our full network model reports are transitioning to Oasis, just that mapping data one. But we're also still kind of working out the exact fields that will be available.
Okay, because you do post the full network model work model scope PDF document on the website under net, and if that's being replaced with this report, then I just ask that you make sure that you include all the information that's in that PDF to this report, because those two fields are important for folks that are trying to keep track of all these new resources that are coming online and where they're interconnecting.
Yeah, I follow you. I believe the reports that we're moving over are the Excel file workbooks that we have today. And I don't know.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
The other ones I don't think we're planning on moving to Oasis just yet, but that one particular full network model mapping data that today is in 2 separate Excel files is the one that we're going to be putting over in Oasis.
Great. I appreciate the clarity. That makes more sense, and I apologize I joined late, so if you said that before, I'm sorry. Thanks.
No worries. No worries.
All right, I'm not showing any other verbal questions at this time.
All right, I see a question in the chat asking about an update with regard to the May compliance month and wanting to know if it's possible for us to know if it's a go or no-go by March 5th. I believe we will know prior to that, Alice, to your question. So I would suggest that you stay tuned to the meetings that we'll have next week. I know that we're quite close to deploying into map stage, and when that occurs, we'll have a better handle on when we can actually deploy into production. Our goal is to give you enough time to test out the new functionality before we deploy into production, and our goal is also to make it happen in time for the May compliance month. So we're working really hard to make that happen. We should have better information for you in just a couple of days. So if you'll tune in to either the CPG on Monday or the release user group on Tuesday, we should have a better idea about the deployment dates for that. Frankly, we wanted to kind of give this training, even though we didn't have the exact deployment date, just so you could get your arms around all of the changes that are coming and at least see what some of the things will be looking like, because you can't yet see that map stage, and we're hoping that this will help give you kind of a head start on what to take a look at and be more prepared for when the CIRA enhancements are deployed into map stage. Hopefully that testing period will go smoothly for you kind of now that you know what to expect from the perspective of changes to the applications. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Do we have any additional callers on the line with questions?
Wait, no, we do have another caller in the question queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, Rita. This is Chanyu again. So did you say that the deployment has not been in map stage, the new changes?
The new changes for CIRA are not in map stage yet. The Oasis reports, 2 of them that we talked about, the NQC report and the CPM report, those are available in map stage now. So those Oasis reports are in map stage, but the CIRA enhancements are not in map stage yet. And
right. Is there a target date for the CIRA enhancement will be in map stage?
We will have more information on the target date for that when you, if you join us on Monday when we do the CPG, the Reliability Requirements CPG. We will have a better idea of when the map stage deployment is. We've got a couple of things that we're working on, and, you know, we just need some time to wrap that up today and tomorrow. And we should know better on Monday when we're going to deploy the CIRA enhancements into map stage. So stay tuned. If you can tune into the CPG, we should have a date for you.
Thank you. Second question I have is I did saw that you have to, when you pull out the report from Oasis, you have a trade day as February 11. So is that the trade day that you have information for the data if I were to go to Oasis and pull those reports? Because what we were told, a meeting before this, which is Tuesday, the talk call, that there isn't any data yet. And so I saw this on the screen, you have February 11 as the trade day. So just want to know whether you pull, when you put this presentation together, you get the report from the map stage or from production, or from somewhere here. Just wanted to confirm if there is a data.
I don't know if there's data available in map stage for you to take a look at. The report that I pulled that was an example was actually from our test environment that I had access to, just so that I could use it and create a sample screenshot. So there is no significance about the February 11th date that you're seeing in that report, other than that just happened to be the day that I took the screenshot. So I don't know if there is actual data in Oasis map stage for you to take a look at for those reports. I haven't honestly looked in that application yet today. So I'm not sure what's available.
Thank you. So I wonder if Train knows the information, because I think that's the information that we kind of look forward to when Tuesday, when she mentioned that there might be updates as what trade day there will be data.
Yes.
Can I tell you? Okay. Oh, hi. So Train's on the call too. So, yeah.
I am. Thank you. So for the map stage environment, our intent, so the Oasis reports are there for connectivity. So we're in the same state in map stage as we were on Tuesday when I provided the TUG update. So we want to have the data flow natively from CIRA in map stage into Oasis in map stage to fully simulate the functionality that you'll see in production as well. And so with that, a prerequisite is, in order to have that data populated in Oasis, is for the CIRA enhancements to be implemented in map stage, so that that data will flow from map stage CIRA into map stage Oasis. So that is what Rado is referring to as far as the CPG for updates on when those CIRA enhancements will go to map stage, and then that will determine the trade date that we will have data populated in the map stage Oasis reports. So no update yet, but just some clarity. Hopefully that will help set some expectations for that.
That helps. Thank you.
Okay.
And we look forward to the Monday update. Thank you.
All right, I'm not showing any other callers in the question queue.
All right, that was the end of the content that we wanted to share with you. We hope that you enjoyed today's trading session, and we appreciate your participation and your good questions. Our goal here is to provide you with an excellent training experience, and I'd like you to actually take a few minutes to complete a training survey that I'm going to put into the chat. Sometimes we send these out, a couple of days after the webinar, once we get a full attendee list from AT&T, but I'd like to, and so sometimes it's not top of mind or fresh in your mind about what we just experienced. So if you would, please, we're ending the call. If you would take a moment to click on the link that I've just pasted into the chat pod, click on the SurveyMonkey survey, and then for the training course, if you would select other and type in CIRA enhancements into the field provided, that really helps us make sure we're providing you with the information you need by allowing you to give feedback on the training and letting us know what you thought of it. So if you would please take a moment to fill that out, I would really appreciate that. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, these slides are posted to the Learning Center on CISA.com, and in a couple of days we will post the recording of this session there as well. If you have any questions on anything presented here today, you can email them to customerreadiness@CISA.com. This concludes our webinar for today. Thank you very much for your participation. We hope that you found it useful and informative. Have a great day, folks, and stay safe.
Well, that concludes our conference. You may now disconnect. Thank you for using Event Services.